Former President Joe Biden's frail health is reigniting Democrats' 2024 failures. Is it time for a shakeup in the party? We asked a group of young, left-leaning voters on Politics IRL. As young Democrats, how does it feel hearing about Joe Biden's recent cancer diagnosis, coupled with the book Original Sin by Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson that details a number of Biden's slip-ups or potential staffers covering up his health or cognitive issues? Ella.
I really struggle with this book. I want to start by saying I think this goes for everyone at the table and also every person on this planet and in this country right now. Is my heart really goes out to former President Biden and Jill Biden and the entire Biden family. This is upsetting. A cancer diagnosis can, really hit on anybody. But I think what has become of this cancer diagnosis is something that is bigger than it necessarily is. And on the book part, it alleges a cover-up. And I quite frankly don't think that's the right word to use. Joe Biden was old. We know that. I don't think anyone's disputing that. Old people biologically age and show signs of aging. Of course, things like memory slips are going to happen, or the occasional trip on the stairs. I really don't think it was a mass cover-up like what is being alleged, but rather just his staff trying to make him look like the best person that they can. I mean, if they were covering something up, they did a horrible job at doing it, to be frank. And
Would you read the book?
I don't know. I'm split right now. My gut instinct would be no.
I personally think that this exact issue is like a symptom of a much larger problem than I think we have in politics today. And I just think that there needs to be a much more even age distribution of the way that Americans are represented in government right now. And I think that even includes the presidency. I think it's fascinating how presidents have gotten older and older, and people are setting records for being the oldest president instead of being the youngest, or even something like possibly in between. And so personally, I think that although I, of course, have a lot of compassion for the Bidens, and I do think that it's very toxic when people's personal health are being politicized in a very dangerous way. And I honestly, as much as I'm not a fan of Trump, I even think his health could potentially fall victim to that exact same trap. And I think that that's wrong, because then how are we going to treat other people in the media when they have health scares? At the same time, I don't think that the staff is necessary to blame, because if I was in a position like that, if I was a White House staffer and all of a sudden the person that I'm working for is having all these random health scares and I don't know the background or the context of it, all you know how to do, especially in high stress situations, is to cover it up. However, I don't think that that means that Joe Biden was, I guess, not too old to be president. I think he was at least a couple years too old, and I personally even think if there's any question of cognitive slip-ups, even if it is just issues with memory, you shouldn't be the commander-in-chief of the military in America. You shouldn't not have that much responsibility. So I find this overall concern to be, I think, a great issue in our country and a great issue in the way that we do politics, though I don't think that I'd take a microscope and be it's Joe Biden's fault and it's his staff's fault that, American politicians are old and there's a lack of accountability there. So
I think he should not have run for re-election ever. I think that was ridiculous, and it really put our democracy on the line in many ways, because it was quite obvious he did not have the stamina to campaign, right? He could not keep up with Trump on the debate stage. And he had a lot of prep for that debate too that they had done. And so what I find concerning is no one came in and stepped up forward in the Democratic Party itself saying to the president, Mr. President, I don't think you should be running again. Or no one publicly did that until it was far too late.
I'm a big Joe Biden fan. I love the guy. I think he's been genuinely one of our better presidents. But we all thought that he was going to be a one-term president. He was going to build back the country, serve one term, and then pass the torch on to the next person. And he didn't. And I think that hurt us in some ways. But with this specific situation, I don't think that there was a conscious cover-up. It was just staff kind of doing their jobs. But my heart goes out to him, and I'm glad, at least now that he has the time to be with his family and recover during this time.
Bella got to this, and it's related to these generational issues or age issues within Congress and other areas of our government. It's not just related to Joe Biden. A lot of top Democrats in Congress are of an older age, and we've seen people like Jasmine Crockett or AOC kind of position themselves for leadership positions within certain committees, and they haven't really gotten there. How does that make you all feel as young Democrats?
For me, I feel like we're in a time of new politics. It's different from the 90s, from the 2000s, and even the 2010s. Mass media is much stronger than it was then. There are these organizations that have outsized influence domestically and even internationally. And Americans have such a deep historic distrust in our institutions. I think that this kind of new playing field has altered politics, and the Republicans have woken up to it. They have capitalized on it, and they're using it to do populist, divisive politics, and it's winning for them. You know, they're winning elections that we frankly should have won. And I think that the Democrats, kind of as a whole, need to wake up to this world of new politics, face it head on, evolve our ideas. You know, we can't do the same formula and expect different results. So we have to change and evolve with it, and that's what they're trying to do.
I have a hard time making sense of that question because it's odd. Because I talk a lot about how I'm hoping to run for state level office in a couple of years at some point. And older people of multiple different generations always are like, oh my gosh, like we need you, you're the next generation, like please do your thing. We want to make room for you. And I feel like I don't see that practically play out anywhere.
I will say you're an independent. I said young Democrats, but that matters
true.
too. So
Yeah, and I think it's probably a similar phenomenon for me because I definitely am left-leaning and like probably would vote with most Democrats. But I do find it to be a little bit disheartening I don't really see a whole lot of follow-up. And I know that there are plenty of older people that do care about raising up the younger generation. I think that there's so much value in like who we are as a generation and the things that we've experienced and that we've pointed out in our society that I think our country would run a lot better, honestly, on both sides of the aisle if there were more young politicians represented. And so I felt a little bit confused, I guess.
I think in Congress there is a valid claim to be made that experience and longevity does serve a really strong role, not in a bad way, but just because Congress is such an ancient institution that has all these intricate traditions and, you know, ways of doing things that are just not written down. I want to see more young people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in those positions of leadership in the House. I think there is a gap that needs to be filled for new generation voices. Like Bella said, we want to see ourselves represented, and we want to have a young voice heard. I think there is a balance to play of just because someone's young doesn't mean they're the best person for the job. I'm afraid that right now Democrats are falling into that kind of area of looking at someone young and saying, okay, great, young person, we're going to snatch you up and take you, and we're going to try and put you in some kind of, you know, authoritative position. I don't like that approach, but that's not to say I don't think that young people should, you know, be able to move up. And now who knows what's going to happen with the ranking member spot on Oversight Dems coming up. Will AOC take that? That'll be a huge position if she does. And I think she will, quite frankly, excel in it. She's proved herself to be tenacious and, you know, be effective at doing the work that Democrats want from an oversight ranking member. But I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily about young people being picked out of the woods and being told that you're young, you get a position. I don't think that's something you see often, actually. What I think needs to be pointed out is that it should be completely about performance, right? And meeting the moment as it is. When Jerry Connolly was selected for Oversight Dems, I think a lot of people felt like there was no actual evidence of Jerry Connolly actually meeting the moment to meet the job. And you know, there was a lot of debate around that in the party, and there was certain former members of leadership in the party that had stepped in on that race and went out of their way to support him. So I'll point that out. It has to be about performance, not age. I think, and also about who meets the moment. Adding on to that, I think what has been hopeful is that we've seen Democrats take on a new leadership approach within the House, right? Hakeem Jeffries is now the leader of the Democratic Party in the House. Catherine Clark, who's from Massachusetts, is also in that leadership, and they're both young for politicians, which isn't considered young to us, but it is young for...
Yeah, what's young for politicians to you?
50, I guess, which is sad to say,
It is.
Okay. Oh. Well, one of the ways to kind of generate this reform that you all are talking about is for kind of new changes. Someone who's been a leader on that in the DNC is David Hogg, who has presented this idea of primarying incumbent Democrats. What do you think of this idea of putting forth new people by primarying some of the old people?
Yeah, I can speak on... I don't think it's appropriate for the vice chair of the DNC to be involved in primaries. I think there's a lot of mistrust within the DNC, so to have a member of leadership in the DNC stepping into primaries and having being involved in them is not good for the institution and building trust. However, I think primaries overall are a good thing, right? Competition is good for our democracy. It's good in every single market you have competition in it's actually a very good thing for everyone else involved. You get the best people, the best products, or whatever. So I'm completely for primaries.
I was just gonna say, I personally, I think because I'm not like an officially affiliated Democrat, I have no like sentimentality or really care for like the institution itself, and I think it completely makes sense if American politicians are already spending so much money in their campaigns as is to keep their seats as incumbents. There should be as much energy and even, I think, financial resources poured into challenging that. And I also just think that the effect that that will have on the American public is net positive compared to maybe the potential like rupturing that'll happen within the party itself. And so I also personally I don't really value party structures, I think, as much as other Democrats do, though I think I would side with the Democratic Party ideologically. I don't really think the party systems in and of themselves serve people. And so I actually think the American public itself, being able to see that there can be turnover in their seats and that maybe even they could have a voice in government, I think would be incredibly valuable. And I think voter turnout has somewhat risen in the past decade-ish, sort of, amongst different demographics, but I still really believe that there's so much more work to be done, and there's so many other countries that have voter turnout rates in the 80th and the 90th percentiles, and I just don't understand why we, probably the most diverse country in the world, why can't we have that same phenomenon? And I do think that there needs to be more turnover in politics so that people can actually see that and get involved and feel empowered to do that.
Agreed. I feel like parties aren't these unchanging monoliths that exist forever. Parties are made to meet the people, support the people, and to elect officials. I mean, they are these fluid, changing bodies, and what matters with parties is the people inside of the parties who they're working to elect, and the people who are doing the electing. And I think that's what we need to keep really in mind here, especially for the Democratic Party. We should be focused on electing people who are going to rebuild that trust, like you said, with the American people, who right now deeply distrust the Democratic Party. And I think that's one of the best ways to do that. I feel like for too long, the Democratic Party has been focused on just electing Democrats in general. I think that we need to focus on electing good Democrats who are going to represent the people and who are going to put in that work, especially now when we're facing one of the biggest threats to our democracy in history. I don't think that we should continue to, like I said, follow that same formula and expect different results. Parties have changed so many times throughout history. We invented them. We can change them. They're not this concrete thing.
So then why is David Hogg getting all the criticism he's been getting? He's getting a lot of heat.
I think he's getting criticism because he's the vice chair of the DNC, going out saying, I'm going to spend $20 million and be personally involved in primary challenges. And, the DNC has so many resources, right? Mm-hmm. Data, technology, so much. And for someone to have all of those resources, to have access to that as vice chair, and then, also be one of the faces of that institution, right? And such a big institution that, plays a big role in how these elections operate, it's quite inappropriate. It's a quite clear conflict of interest there, and it's not appropriate at all.
I agree with Matthew about the fluidity of the Democratic Party. I think the changes that Ken Martin is starting to bring to the Democratic Party, I think, to me, are a breath of fresh air. I think we are starting to see the DNC move itself closer to the people, slowly but surely, through different initiatives. I mean, we're making huge grassroots investments in state parties. State parties are inevitably closer to the people. We're starting people's cabinets that are bringing people from diverse backgrounds who are not, politicos, but rather people who are somewhat politically apt, but still have a repertoire with the people that they surround themselves with and that they represent or that they share a community with. I fundamentally disagree on that some of that change is changing from just electing Democrats to electing good Democrats. I think a Democratic Party strength that we have right now, especially in the face of Republican cult of personality that we're having going on, is the Democrats' diversity. I think what David Hogg is doing, I'm not against primarying. I agree with Kavish that primary strength is where the power of our democracy lies. We need to have primaries that are robust, but that doesn't mean that the Democratic National Committee, the Democratic Party, goes into these local primaries and says, all right, here's a candidate, we really like them, we're going to throw a bunch of money behind them. Mm-hmm. ultimately that skews with that Democratic primary process. I really think the criticism that David Hogg is getting is valid. I think if he wants to do that, that's fine. Organizations like Leaders We Deserve and other nonprofits are absolutely allowed to do that. I think the DNC should have more resources for people who are looking to run for office at all levels.
Of course, no, I know what you're saying, and the Democratic Party has been doing a lot. In my role as chair of the College Democrats of Massachusetts, we've been working hard to elect Democrats up and down the ballot, especially in this last election.
Both of you are noting some very positive things within the party right now.
Oh
Yes.
yeah, no,
Yes.
But a lot of Americans disagree. Recent polls from Fox News and CNN have Democrats underwater.
Yes.
So the criticisms, are they warranted or not?
I think that they have their heart in the right place. Oh, sorry.
No, you can go.
I feel like they have their heart in the right place and that we're doing good. And I met a ton of people who are doing the right thing, who are working hard, like Kamala HQ, or people on the ground like grassroots, like we're talking about. But I think that we need to continue to strive forward. You know, we can never get complacent, especially right now. And people's distrust in us means we need to push even further. You were talking about the polls and everything. There was just a poll out of the Harvard youth. The polling for the Democratic Party right now with youth is lower than that of the Republican Party during the Tea Party era, which of course caused a whole revitalization within that party. I think that we need to listen to them. We're making changes, but frankly, I think that we need to continue to make even more changes. And with David Hogg as vice chair, I think for me, I separate it between him personally and the DNC itself. I think that neutrality is almost impossible to fully strive for, especially in politics. I mean, this is politics, after all, and people, right?
I saw Kavish sighing over here. What's going on?
I don't know.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
I think generally, David, it's just that it just doesn't feel, it just feels so icky. I don't know if anyone just feels very
it reminds
icky
me
about
of like machine politics.
I honestly
smoke
feel the
it
opposite of icky. I think it's so screwed up how much money are in politics already, and there's so many young people that are disenfranchised because of the lack of money and resources that they have, that I don't think it's that crazy for the Democrats to decide to sponsor a younger candidate.
So
I think so.
I think fundamentally I agree with you on the money. That's why I'm for something that the DNC creates that just gives money to people running for office, whether it's local, state, federal. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're an incumbent. It doesn't matter if you're a new member. It gives you support. It gives you grassroots power. It gives you funding. I think we need to start opening the door so that we can just generally have more candidates in a primary. If, like I said, if that means that some of that assistance does go to an incumbent, I'm not saying it's just a free-for-all that people are like, I want this and grab it. I have an idea, I can't beautifully articulate it right now, but there needs to be something so that we do and dismantle those barriers. Inevitably, yes, that's going to help more young people to run for office, but that could be open seats. That could be local school committees. That could be state representatives where it's not a, really tense race.
I hear that, and I also just think that is still a little bit problematic to me, because I think that there should be like specific backing for young candidates and new candidates. Like, I don't think the incumbents need resources from the party, and I think even to the point about like general criticism in the Democratic Party, I think like this is why a lot of Americans aren't seeing eye to eye with the party itself. And I think that the Democrats going forward have to toe the line between populism and what I'm about to describe. But I think like the brand of the Democrats, as someone who isn't one, like there's a lot of reasons why the American public has distrust with the party, and I wasn't that surprised, especially as someone who was originally from the South, at the results of the election. And I think with that said, I really strongly believe that people need to see themselves in politics, and then they'll feel empowered to be civically engaged themselves. And I think that's the biggest issue that we have right now in American politics is a undereducated, not civically engaged public. And I think that the Democrats need to focus on locally picking people that can properly represent that locality well, whether it's taking into account demographics and even age also, and placing that person in the forefront.
Yeah.
And so I do think that makes sense for specific resources to be able to go into cultivating these people that the public can look to and trust, but also to see themselves in.
So I think, I agree with you. There needs to be more competition in democracy, right? And more primaries. These things make our party better. They make our candidates better. I think when it comes to DNC making investments, I don't think the DNC should ever make an investment into a primary. And the reason why is because when you're at a primary, state legislative, for example, those couple of towns that are in that district, they know what's best for them, right? So at that point, if the DNC were to step in and say, I'm backing this candidate. Meanwhile, people locally are backing another candidate. It becomes a whole conflict. And if the person that, gets additional funding and that money makes a big difference in the election, which money does make differences in politics, right? Then there's a candidate who's now the nominee who doesn't really align with the base and the activists and the leaders locally, and then they have more of a chance of actually losing. So I think allowing primaries to play out, to happen, is fundamental. I think what the DNC can do, and do a lot better, is they can invest in, again, like Ella pointed out, resources for candidates. How can you create a good budget? How can you reach voters? Those sort of like technical things that really do take a lot of time and take a lot of strategy. And, there needs to be a lot more energy put into that.
The issue that I take is the Democratic National Committee losing its neutrality and picking Democrats at the statewide level, or at the national level, I guess. But I think that money and those resources can go towards local Democratic committees to help in expanding outreach, to say, hey, there's going to be a position open, or we have a Republican, or we have a Democratic incumbent that we as a town committee vehemently disagree with. We want someone to run against them. Mm-hmm. We have some money to help you, and we'll help you. That, I think, is perfectly fine, because that avoids exactly what Kavish was talking about. It's the DNC vice chair, the huge institution at the national level, going into these local areas and saying, that one. That's what I have the issue with.
I feel like we keep conflating David Hogg with the DNC and saying they're the same. But the DNC is full of those people. The DNC is full of union leaders, congressional staff who leave their offices to go work on campaigns.
Agreed.
Even some state party chairs donate, endorse, and work on primary campaigns. And he is doing it in his capacity.
So,
it's not the DNC.
But I think
we can focus on what's good.
I think that behavior, though, is inappropriate generally from the
fair,
DNC, from everyone involved. So,
You can't pick and choose neutrality, though.
But I don't think Ken Martin should get involved in elections. He's not going to get in them. I don't think Malcolm Kenyatta should also be getting elections. Nope. I don't think he is either.
Jason Ray. I mean, you can list the entirety of the DNC leadership. I mean, again, these are, sorry, I'll let you keep going, but these are the people at the helm. It's not about the low-level staffers who also have, after 5 o'clock, they go and work on a campaign. Yeah. I mean, that's fine, in my opinion. You may disagree with me. But it's the people who are running the DNC, who are the face of the DNC, who are in their capacity as leadership, going and doing it.
To that point, like in Massachusetts, you don't see Steve Kerrigan endorsing and donating to campaigns that are in primaries. Yeah. And frankly, I was an intern at the Mass Dems for a brief time, and I was consulting candidates, and they actually went to me and said, Kavish, we need to check in with legal counsel to see if you're even able to do this and accept these checks that you're getting, right? So, in Massachusetts, I think the model we have where it's even state party staff have to stay neutral, even state party interns have to stay neutral, right? The fact that they went to council because of what I was doing, and I didn't get in trouble, it was fine, it was before I had started there. Just wanted to clear that up.
Glad that you didn't get in trouble. We're running low on time. I want to ask you guys briefly, because I think that this is an issue that a lot of Americans have highlighted throughout the 2024 election, is what is the main goal of the Democratic Party? What does the Democratic Party stand for? In one sentence, each of you.
I feel like we need to stand for the people. I feel like the Democratic Party used to really be for the people, for like the workers, for the everyday people. Exactly.
But you're saying what it should stand for. What does it stand for?
What does it stand for?
Yeah.
I think it's a couple of different things. So I think that a lot of the people have it good in their hearts to care for the people, right? But I think that the perception is something different. And whether that's true or not, because I still work with the Democratic Party and I love electing Democrats, I think that the perception of it is that it's not supporting those everyday people. And we need to help change that perspective by helping the people more, doing those shifting, ideas, letting new voices in, and getting to fit the times more. And I think that...
I think the Democratic Party is standing for, basically just trying to, grasp at, the little, bits and pieces of, the progressive movement in America that's, I think is separate somewhat from the Democratic Party, and is trying to harness that towards getting Republicans out of office. I think that's really all that it is it's trying to channel, energy coming from other places in America and trying to use it against the Republican Party, but it's often misused, I think, in communication and in ideology as well.
Yeah, I think Democrats right now stand for being know-it-alls, which is not a good thing, right? We act like we know it all, we know it better. We simply, there's too much to be inspired from in the world for us to know it all and act like experts of everything. I'd rather have a party and our party comms be shaped in a way that's learn it all, right?
Yes.
How can we learn from people, build from people, upskill ourselves, and we're missing that right now.
I think Democrats stand for opportunity. I think we are at a crossroads as to define what opportunity means and for who. And I think that ultimately we need to define. And I think that will get us much further when we do. And I think it will resolve some of the distrust that we have right now when we define what does opportunity mean.
So for a closing question, I'd love for everyone to share who's a Democrat locally or nationally who's doing it right and who has lost the plot.
I think someone who's doing it the wrong way is Diana DiZoglio. I think that she has, not properly managed her staff or her team well, and I think
We'll note that she's the Massachusetts State Auditor. For the
State
folks at
Auditor
home.
Diana DiZoglio. And I also have concerns regarding how she's conducting herself as a leader within our party. I think someone who's doing it quite well at the national level is Rep. Ocasio-Cortez. I think she's on the forefront of standing up to the Trump administration, leading large rallies, mobilizing people on the ground. That's really important work. It's keeping activists hopeful, but also ready to fight, which is super fundamental for these times.
I'll start with someone who's doing it right, because I'm pretty positive of this, but I think Maxwell Frost is doing it right. And I really appreciate how he collaborates with different people in different generations within the party. And I also find him to be provocative and outspoken, while definitely kind of playing the game to work his way up. And so I think that I think he's been doing a pretty great job, though I think he has many ways to go and hopefully will continue to. I think somebody who is doing it wrong, and I think it's only because of age, but I do think Ed Markey and Elizabeth Warren need to step down. I think they really need to step down. And I think that they're both very admirable people and have done great work for the state of Massachusetts, and I think they've represented the state very well. But I actually think Massachusetts could be an amazing, innovative forerunner of new policy and new politics if they allow younger people to come in and take those seats.
This is tough because I love them and I love DiZoglio. This isn't the debate time. I feel like I don't want to name names for who's not doing it right now, but I feel like overall we shouldn't have representatives who are in office for their entire lives who don't do too much with their time in office and continue to run nearly unopposed each cycle. We should have competition, keep these representatives accountable, and keep these new ideas going forwards. For people who are doing it right, a couple of my favorites are Pete Buttigieg, of course. I mean, everybody loves him. He's going on TV, meeting people where they're at. Exactly, going on Fox News. And also Andy Beshear from Kentucky. Yeah. Love him so much. Same thing, he meets people where they are. He is very clear with his ideas. And I'd love to see him do more eventually in politics. Be cool.
I'll also start with who's doing it right. I think our Democratic governors are doing it right. I think our Democratic governors are some of the strongest Democrats we have out there. Andy Beshear, Gretchen Whitmer, Laura Kelly, Maura Healey. I can rattle them off. Tim Walz, Josh Shapiro. I could keep going. I think these Democrats are the Democrats who are truly showing that they are in tune to the people, that they are fighting for what matters to the everyday American, and they are maintaining a good split between being a Democrat with a national presence so that they have name recognition and that people associate Democrats with them in a positive light, while also staying true to their home states and the issues that concern their home states. I value that a lot, and that'll segue me into who I think is doing it wrong. I agree with Bella. I think Ed Markey and Elizabeth Warren are they're too old. I think, and I'll go further, I think Ed Markey and Elizabeth Warren have lost touch with the people of Massachusetts in the way that they have become so captivated in the national attention that oftentimes they forget the issues, the unique issues that we are dealing with here in Massachusetts.
We will have to leave it there. Thank you all so much for participating.
Thank
It really
you.
did fly by. It really did.
Do you think the Democratic Party needs to change? Tell us in the comments, like and subscribe.